everybody. My name's Mike Fitzgerald. I'm from the Brattleboro Police Department, and like Cassandra was saying tonight, we're going to talk a little bit about the complex challenges of illegal drugs, how law enforcement looks at that, and that might be a little bit different than how other members of the community look at it, but you're going to see by the end of this presentation, hopefully, how we look at it and how other different silos within the community look at it, that we destroy those silos, and how we have one big collective view of this problem and how we can solve it. Very first thing that I feel we had to do at the Brattleboro Police Department years ago was we had to change the culture of our officers on how we're dealing with crime within town, how we look at our role in dealing with that. So we wrote our mission statement. We sat down, we got the officers together, and they rewrote that. And the reason I'm putting this up in this form, it's not so you can all memorize the mission statement. It's basically, I want you to read the last sentence. While serving the community, we recognize the differences in the conduct of people who need our help, those who make poor decisions, and those who choose to victimize others. I think that is very, very important. And I think every police officer, when they're dealing with somebody, they need to remember that very last sentence. What are you dealing with? Are you dealing with someone who made a poor choice? Are you dealing with someone who is a predator? They victimize others? Or are you dealing with someone that needs our help? So we have to change the mindset on how we're dealing with this, not just with drugs, but across the board. So that's the reason I put that up there. I'm very proud the officers did this. This was nothing that the chief did and threw down to them and said, this is the way it's going to be. I basically explained my philosophy and vision. They got together as a group. Several drafts later, this was the final product. So that's the mindset of the officers. That's not the mindset of Mike Fitzgerald. That's the mindset of the officers of the Brattleboro Police Department. And I want you to remember that as we go through this presentations, because I'm sure you will see that that is ingrained in a lot of what I have to say. Oh, and by the way, if you have a question, please raise your hand. You don't have to wait to the end. There will be time at the end to ask questions, but if we're talking about a subject now, I'd rather answer your question now than a half hour later go back. So please don't be shy. Complex challenges, the illegal drugs they have on the affected communities. We talked about that a little bit. Substance abuse disorders are a disease. Diseases that can be prevented, treated, and recovered from. That is our outlook on that. How does that connect with what we're trying to talk today? Because substance abuse is one effect of the drug culture, just one effect. And we have to deal with it as a whole, not just the addiction portion. I really struggled with this slide because if we got Prudence from the Department of Health and said, what is your goal? If we got Cassandra and said, what is your strategy? Hopefully everybody would be on board with the next one. Who should be involved? And last, how does law enforcement fit into this? I mean, what can we bring to the table? We can arrest. We can bring you in front of a judge. Anybody in here agree that that is an effective way of dealing with illegal drugs and substance abuse? I'll tell you right now, I don't think it's an effective way, okay? So how does law enforcement fit into this? We'll talk about that at great length. I think if we go back to our mission, what is our goal? When we're dealing with complex drugs issues, what did that last sentence say? Peaceful, prosperous, safe community. Does anybody dispute that illicit drug activity has a negative effect on every one of those components. Okay, so that should be part of our goal. Go back to our mission statement. Let's look at a safe, prosperous community. What is our strategy? I'm going to go really in deep on this one as the presentation goes on, because I'm not going to give you all our secrets, but I'm just going to explain in a 10,000 foot view of what we do with information and how we go about it. Who should be involved? That is every single person of the community. Every single person. I mean, teachers, right off the bat, kindergarten all the way up. Teachers, parents, neighbors, landlords, property owners. I mean, we all have a responsibility in this, every single one of us, because if we're negligent in that area, it adversely affects the community. And it's just going to take everybody. And what is our role? Once again, I'm going to go back to the mission statement. Our role is to know the difference. When we're dealing with illicit drug activity, when we're dealing with substance abusers, that is our role. Are you a person that needs help? Did you make a poor decision? Or are you victimizing others? And then we take the appropriate action once that is in place. I broke this down into two categories, the environment and people. Let's talk about the environment first. A majority of our problems is a function of the drug environment. Some agencies across the country call it different things. It goes by many different names, the drug market, area, things of that nature. But what is a drug environment? It's a place where you can readily purchase drugs. Everybody knows where it is. The people that want to sell it know where to go to sell it. The people that want to buy it know where to go to buy it. A perfect stranger could go into that community and know where they can buy drugs and know where they can sell drugs. It is the drug market, if you will, the drug environment. You'll find out more times than not, it is defined by geographical boundaries. Even in our town in Brattleboro, I'm sure if you go down and ask people, where is the crime-ridden areas of town? Where can you get the drugs readily available in town? We all know you can go anywhere in town and basically get drugs. But where is the defined boundaries? And if I ask the 20, 30 people that are here in this room, I would venture to say a large majority of you would probably be in the ballpark of those neighborhoods. Okay, so it's defined by geographical boundaries, and that's important. This last statement really hits home. Much of the crime and community damage associated with the drug problem is a function of the drug environment, not the sales or use of drugs. It's a function of the environment. And that's what law enforcement really has to zero in on. If we want to make strides in dealing with the illicit drugs, the drug sales or use, I'm not saying we're going to ignore them. I didn't say that at all. I'm saying if we're going to focus our time, money, energy, staffing, we should look at the drug environment.
I have a question then. So
sure.
Sometimes people say if you just you address it in your community. If you live in an area that would be considered a drug environment, a lot of times they'll say, well, we'll just end up moving it to another place, right? Like, so if you deal with it in your street, it's just moving to another location. So it's not necessarily addressing the issue, but rather just moving it around. And I don't know if you have anything to say to that. I do. And I'll get ahead of myself, but I'll say it anyway because that's a very good question. Number one, we have to get involved before the drug environment or the geographical area is defined. Because once it's defined and it grows roots, then it's less acceptable to our effects, okay? If it's just setting up in an area, we're much more effective. So you're right, it will move.
My biggest concern is, like, if we do the sales of the users, you take a drug dealer and remove him and send him to jail, another one's going to move right in. Okay, it's part of life, we get that. Where's this guy going to go when he gets out of jail? He's going to go right back to the old neighborhood, his old friends. Why? It's the environment. It's the defined geographical area. So if it's hard to move. A lot of people say, well, yeah, they're just going to move. I disagree with that to an extent. Okay, it's not going to be as well entrenched. It's not going to be as well defined. It may move to another house, but you'll find law enforcement efforts in battling that is much, much easier, because now you're moving into areas where the neighbors haven't, I don't want to say given up, but that's our neighborhood, that's what it is. You know, now all of a sudden you got people going, well, wait a minute, why is these cars in my driveway at 8 o'clock at night? They're more apt to pick up the phone and say, there's cars parked in my driveway at 8 o'clock at night. They go in next door for 5 minutes, come back out, get in the cars and go. Oh, and by the way, the license plate is Vermont 123-456. You know, they're more apt to be aggressive in it because it's alien to them, it's new to them. So when it's defined, it's there, and I'll show you some of the strategies and tactics that we use, but I don't really buy into, like, we remove one dealer and then the whole geographic is going to shift 6 blocks and be reestablished as intensely as it was. It takes years to get reestablished. So that is a good question, because a lot of people have concerns about that. What are some of the problems of the environment, if you will, or that area? Crime hotspots. That's where you get your assaults. That's where you're going to get your complaints on trespassing. That's where you're going to get the public drunkenness, public urination, all sorts of crimes, your petty thefts. Usually are going to happen in those areas. Some of the other problems, they make public spaces unusable. Sidewalks, parks, buildings, stores. And as I'm talking, I can imagine everybody in this room is thinking places in Brattleboro that are like, bam, absolutely. That is what is happening. Presence of transients, the perception. There's a lot of people that won't go in certain areas of town simply because there's homeless people there, there's transients there, and it's the perception. If you worked on straight data, I think a lot of people would be surprised. If you came to me and said, this place is very, very unsafe, and I can pull up the data to see how many times we go down there, how many arrests we made in that area, and you would be very, very surprised. Because if you asked me and I went straight off the data, I could say, no, that's a very safe place. We very rarely go down there and we very rarely make arrests. But it's the perception of the transients and whatnot. Reduced property values in the neighborhoods. Failed or displaced businesses. Here's a big thing. It's an entry point into crime for young people. You get people that are susceptible, open-minded, unsupervised. They're hanging around with a crowd that's much older. A lot of criminal activity. It's an entry point for the young people. They can go over to this person's house who's 25, 26 years old. They're 16, they're 17. They can hang out. They can get high. They can drink beer. They can do whatever they want. And then go home. Next night, do it again. Pretty soon, they're spending nights there. They're spending weekends there. They're getting immersed into this culture. That's part of the drug environment. And obviously, it facilitates drug use and addiction. They can go there, they can get high, they can hang out, they can sober up, and then they can go home. It's a safe place for them to do that. That's all a product of the environment. The environment is much more concern for law enforcement than the addiction. We have a lot of agencies, a lot of really good people, a lot of grassroots programs that can really help out with the addiction. Law enforcement, all we can do is educate, let them know about those great agencies. But we really need to concentrate on the environment that facilitates this issue. What are some of the dynamics of the environment? Like I stated earlier, people know where to buy and where to sell. They feel comfortable down there. They're surrounded by people that are not going to talk to us. They're surrounded by people that have accepted this lifestyle or the environment. Not that they like it, not that they condone it. It's just like, nah, well, you know, we live on the street. If you buy a house next to an airport, you're going to hear planes at night. If you buy a house in this neighborhood, it's drug dealing. So in that way, I'm certainly not saying, you know, don't buy a house in that area, it's their fault. It's just how the mindset happens. Enforcement alone is ineffective. Okay, people move in and out of there, they shuffle, they go to jail, they come back, they may move on, go to other places, but enforcement alone is not effective. And once established, it's really resistant to attention. You've seen it. I mean, everyone in this room has seen it. You're here because you've been exposed to this and you're very knowledgeable in what's going on. The people that are involved in this, the attention does not bother them in that environment. We get calls that say, look at it, blatantly, right in front of me, I saw this. But if you took that pair of people and put them in outside of their environment, I guarantee you they wouldn't feel that comfortable doing it. And you ask yourself, why? Why? You know, I mean, it is frustrating, and it's something that we really have to wrap our hands around. So once the geographical area is established, and that's what Cassandra was saying, it's resistant to attention, but it takes a lot for them to move and reestablish up to that level again. Let's talk a little bit about the people that we deal with. I wrote some definitions up there because if and when you call the police department, these are some of the things that run through our mind, which if you're not informed of, you might be upset. Well, you will be upset about our response or our actions or lack of actions. Very important. First one we're going to talk about is reasonable suspicion. The legal definition of reasonable suspicion is based on slight proof. Opinion. That is huge. It's opinion. Reasonable suspicion is an opinion. Law enforcement, what they do at that point is investigate further. And we do have limits. We can ask a couple questions. We can ID. If we have nothing further to go on that brings us to probable cause, our interaction ends. It's called the Constitution. It's civil liberties. We can't do that. No matter what you say, we cannot do that. And you wouldn't want us to do that. So reasonable suspicion based on slight proof, it's an opinion, we can investigate. Our investigate is merely questioning, maybe ID, run the person's name to see if there's any warrants. That's pretty much about it, which makes a lot of people mad. Yes?
I just have a quick question about that. So when I see being from, you know, the culture, the environment, and I see activity at a residence, and I call, and I just, so you guys know, so-and-so, this is going on, and it's, happening in a neighborhood where there's young kids, and so all you guys can do is drive by and...
We can go up and knock on the door and introduce ourselves and talk and say, we got a complaint of the foot traffic in this area. I mean, basically, why did you call us? Okay, they're a nuisance, they're harassing, a lot of foot traffic, motor vehicle traffic. Basically you're bothering your neighbors. Is everything okay? Is there anything we can do to help you out? And if they're like, nope, just sorry, we're okay. A lot of friends come and visit. Can we come in? Nope. Okay. Thank you. Have a nice day. Ask them for their name and date of birth and move on at that point, if there's nothing leading us to probable cause.
Can you ask for the names of the people that are visiting?
Yes. Oh, we can ask anything we want. It doesn't mean you got to give us everything we ask, okay? But yeah, we can ask, and we do ask a lot. Probable cause. The key word there is facts. Facts and circumstances which would make a reasonable and prudent person believe that a crime has been committed and that a particular person had committed it. What can we do once we reach the level of probable cause? We can arrest. So you can see pretty big difference between those two levels. Okay, we have to have probable cause to arrest. We cannot arrest on opinion. We have to have facts. So when you call, you see some suspicious activity, and you see me hand this gentleman money and then put my hand back in my pocket and walk away, do you have probable cause for an arrest at this point?
No.
Absolutely not. Absolutely not.
What if it's known?
Do you have reasonable suspicion to go up and talk to them?
Yeah.
Sure, we go up and talk to them. So that's where we fall, and sometimes that's where a disconnect is a lot with the citizens that call the police and get very frustrated with our actions or lack of actions when we leave. We have to have probable cause to arrest. We cannot violate people's amendments. We can't do illegal search and seizures. We can't detain them. Okay? We have to follow that. They have the same amount of civil liberties as you and I and everybody else. And that's, nobody is debating that. That's the way it should be. So I just wanted to make that clear, so as we go further on, you'll understand what I'm talking about. Yes, sir.
Under civil liberties, is a civilian mandated to answer his name when asked by a police officer?
Not in all circumstances. Not in
And the
all.
probable cause, I'm guessing, or, I mean, reasonable suspicion, that's less obligation to give the name?
Yes, ma'am?
I have a question. Online, there's that tip thing that you can, how well is that monitored?
Very well.
Okay.
We get them all the time.
Okay,
You gotta remind you.
because I did that last year.
Sure.
When there was a really suspicious, I work in the field.
Yeah.
But, and I kind of know what a drug deal looks like.
We're gonna talk about that.
And so I knew the first names of both the people. Sent in a thing that, every day about noon, they walk by my house, they give high five to each other, and I have that reasonable suspicion, but I did send that in. And I was just wondering how that was monitored.
It is.
Okay,
That absolutely. What you have to remember though, the time lapse
yeah,
between it, because that's state.
right.
Brattleboro, we have our own, but we look, well, it's our own email.
Yeah, I did, I went on the Brattleboro.
Oh, you went on the Brattleboro one?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, the state has one also, Brattleboro has our own, but you have to mind, like if you send it 7 o'clock on a Friday evening, it wouldn't, nobody would look at it until Monday morning at 7:30.
Okay,
So that's something to remember.
okay. Thank you.
Let's talk a bit about when we get suspicious calls, because I get a lot of complaints from the citizens when dealing with suspicious calls. I will say a majority of the complaints that come across my desk are about citizens that called in about suspicious calls and are unbelievably irate that we did nothing, okay? And another thing they talk about is the dispatchers that we have. And I've sat down and talked with all my dispatchers. I told them exactly what I was going to say tonight. And I sat down with all the lieutenants and my captain and told them exactly what I was going to say tonight. So everybody's on the same sheet of music. The dispatcher is going to ask you questions, your basic 5 W's. Who, what, when, where, why. What is your name and what is your date of birth? Okay? They try to gather as much information so they can paint a picture for that officer who's going to be going to that incident, has as much information as possible. People get very, very upset when they say, I just saw a drug deal. Our dispatchers are going to ask you, what is a drug deal? What did you see? They're not going to tell our officers we saw a drug deal. They're going, what did you see? You saw 2 people shaking hands. You saw one person give money to another and then put their hand in their pocket. I'm not saying it isn't a drug deal. I'm going back to reasonable suspicion, probable cause, police reaction to this. So they're going to ask you a whole lot of questions. I immediately get a phone call, or if it's in the evening on my voicemail, saying, I just spoke to your dispatchers, they treated me like I was 5. I know a drug deal when I see a drug deal. Our dispatchers aren't being disrespectful. Number one, they're trying to get all the information together, exactly what did you see. So, dispatcher's going to get all the information. The next thing that has to go into this equation is all our calls are prioritized. If I have an officer that is actually investigating a crime, am I going to pull him or her from that crime to go to this suspicious call? Or can this suspicious call wait? Goes back to the information that dispatch has gathered from you. Okay, so are we going to release an officer that is investigating a theft where we know there was a theft, a crime was committed? Or if they're investigating that burglary, or that domestic violence, or that assault, are we going to pull them from that to go to this? Oops. Thank you. So that's another thing that we have to do. We have to prioritize our calls. Officer safety. What are the knowns? We're going to ask you if you know the people. We can run them in our database. Are they aggressive towards police officers? Have we arrested them before on drug charges? All the aspects of that scene, once again, dispatch is going to ask you, and we're going to take in all of our knowns, and we're going to give this to the officer before he goes. We get there. Reasonable suspicion, we talk to the individual. It doesn't reach the level of probable cause, so we leave. You're very mad. I understand that. You're frustrated. I understand that. I saw this drug deal go down. I called the police department. They came. They went up and talked to that guy, got in their cruiser and just left and did nothing. Or maybe the deal already happened. Individuals aren't even there. They just drove right by and did nothing. I understand your frustration. However, what happens behind the scenes is what a lot of people don't understand. That information goes into a database. We sit down and we're like, okay, we're getting suspicious calls in this part of the neighborhood or this part of town. We're looking for a green car that has this state plates on it. We have roll call. We talk about stuff like this. We have gotten 4 calls. That's why it goes back to what you were saying. It's real hard to get established in the area if it's done properly. But once it's established, we have to whittle away at it. So now we're looking at saying, wow, we haven't got a lot of calls in this area of the town before. What is happening? So we're going to take half of our shift, half of our overlap, and we're going to put it at that end of the town, and they're just going to sit there. They're going to do motor vehicle work. They're going to get out of their cruisers and walk around. They're going to be a presence because it's not defined. They don't feel safe there. They don't feel, it's an unknown to them. Whoa, cops, we're out of here. Let's go back to our geographical area. Let's go back here. Okay? And while we're whittling away on that, we're trying to contain everything else that's in there. So we'll run arrest warrants to see if they have warrants. We talk to the task force. We talk to the state. And it's like a jigsaw puzzle. Everybody's putting this together. They're looking at it, they're doing their investigations. Okay, this is a new name. Who are their known associates? Where are they staying? Who lives there? We'll talk to the landlords. Who rents apartment A? Landlords are very helpful. They don't want a drug house. They want to be known as good business people. So they're very helpful. So it all works together. But I would say a majority of it, from your suspicious calls, a vast majority of it happens behind the scenes. And that individual that you called about 2.5 months ago will eventually be arrested. I'm telling you that right now. They will eventually be arrested because they're going to continue to do what they're doing. We're going to continue to do what we're doing. And the state, the task force, the locals, municipalities, he's going to get arrested, or she. Eventually will get arrested, okay? But it doesn't happen immediate, and it doesn't happen in the front page of the papers, and it's not out in front where everybody can see it. So, I'm adamant. I say it all the time. If you see something suspicious, please call the police department. If you want to talk to an officer, ask for the supervisor. There's always a supervisor on. Please do not ask to speak to me. My wife would disagree, but I'm not there 24/7, okay? If you call on Friday night and say, I'd like to talk to the chief, dispatch is going to put you in my voicemail, and the earliest I'm going to get back to you is probably Monday. And if Monday's a packed day, maybe Tuesday or Wednesday. I might be up in Montpelier or Burlington. So please don't ask for me. And then call back 2 days later saying, I called you Friday, you told me to call, I did, and nobody did anything. It's because nobody knew about it. Ask for the on-duty supervisor. And once again, we've talked about this with my team. They're there. When they go home, another one comes in. There's always a supervisor there 24/7. So if you want to make a report to dispatch, let them prioritize the call, and then an officer goes out. If you're okay with that, great. But if you want to talk to want to talk to an officer, please ask for the supervisor. They in turn will get your information and give you a call back.
So you can be anonymous though if you make your report. So if they ask you for your name and your contact information, you could tell them, well, could you say, I'll tell you if you need to call me, but I don't want it written down, or is there like a way to? We
will accommodate anything that people would like. But I would like to put this out as an asterisk. If something is anonymous, where is that on the credibility scale? You know, if someone called in and made an anonymous complaint, where am I going to go with that? Once they just said, your officers are crooks, they steal all the time.
I think just some people are scared.
And I realize that, yeah. But once again, there's ways about that. Now, in certain areas of town, would you want a cruiser pull up in front of your house, walk up, talk to you, get back out, turn around, go 2 houses down, and then knock at that door? Probably not. And we understand that, we get that, absolutely. But if you want to come to the station, if you want to meet off-site, if you just want to talk on the phone and simply say, look, I'm not giving you my name, I'm not giving you information, however, every day at this time, this happens, or on Friday nights, it goes through the roof, just making you aware of it. That goes back to what we were talking about earlier. That information doesn't go off to the wayside. We will sit down and at a roll call say, okay, what do we got? It either comes from dispatch, the captain, or myself. We get all this intel, and then we sit down and say, okay, when you're available, I want you in this part of town. Just hang out, get a cup of coffee, go up there and park. See what this complaint is about. See if you see what they're talking about.
What happens if somebody gives their name and contact information? Like, usually where does that go? I guess that's another question, because I think, people don't necessarily know when they give their name and they're making a call, like what that means. Like, are they going to be, is that person going to be told who made the report? Is it only if they went to court and you got called, like, subpoenaed? Like, I don't know. I think that might be part of it. Is, so what do you do with that information? Is it just to get back to them or to get more details, or is it so that you might need to pull them from point during the investigation?
That's a really good question. First and foremost, we don't exclude anything from the state's attorney's office so when things go to court. I mean, that's illegal. I mean, we have to have full disclosure on what's going on. However, you call us and we go there, and a couple days in a row, and we independently verify what's happening, then it's our affidavit. We saw this. We saw this. And if they say, what made you go there, we can say, we got a complaint from a citizen. We got an anonymous complaint. I mean, so you're right, there's ways around that. But if you're part of the arrest, then yes, it's going to be discoverable. Absolutely. Okay, but you can remain anonymous, and we can independently verify what you're saying. So that's what I'm saying. Don't let people, and hopefully they don't get wrapped around the fact as, oh my God, I'm having no part of that. You simply can be anonymous and give us the information and let us independently verify what's happening. Absolutely. We talked about the little civil liberties. These are some numbers. Some people like numbers, other people do not. Basically, 2015, these are statewide. We had 21,528 bags of heroin seized, bulk, 581 grams, street value of approximately $600,000. That was in
the $10 bags?
Yes. Mm-hmm. Yeah, 10, 15. Yeah. That was 2015. 2016, we had 26,874 bags. Those numbers on the far right are the difference between 15 and 16. So that was 5,346 more bags. Bulk heroin was 1,679 grams. That's an increase of 1,097. And street value was 1,202,850, which is 602,880 more than 2015. So it's out there. We understand it. We're being aggressive with it. Once again, this is statewide. It's a statewide issue. No community in Vermont is immune. So we are working on it. What's scary is what we don't find is what is scary. Yes, ma'am.
Can I ask you a question? Are you part of a law enforcement coalition? Because you know, the sellers oftentimes are middle management, and then there's upper level management. And I'm curious about how, is it a regional thing, New England region, or would it be national? How does it all work to try to catch the big people at the top?
Well, you have, obviously, there is federal levels, DEA. The state of Vermont has a DEA agent. So, but we don't have anybody on the DEA team. The state of Vermont has task force that work throughout the state, and they are complemented by local police officers with the state troopers that are trained. They go to federal schools, they're trained. So they have a really quick link to the federals and within the state, and that gives the municipalities a really quick link to the state.
Because I'm thinking
With our
about these dealers
investigators.
that end up going to prison, meaning, you know, some of them, I understand, are addicted themselves. Do you know what I mean? So it becomes a rehab process, but it's also trying to cut off that connection.
Right. Yep. But to answer your question, absolutely. We have all levels, federal, state, and local, that are all working in collaboration together. We all make a team of different people, and without going in a lot of detail, absolutely, yeah. And they, in turn, work with Massachusetts, and New Hampshire, and New York, and New Jersey. Sometimes everybody doesn't play well in the sandbox, but, you know, it works well.
Yeah, thank you.
Does this include the fentanyl? Because I know that that's becoming an issue. Is this kind of in that heroin numbers? Is it the fentanyl as well that's being sold as heroin?
Two more questions.
Yes, I'm sorry.
Is that street value, that's for the bags and bulk combined?
Yes.
How do the numbers compare in Vermont to across the border in New Hampshire?
That's a good question. I'd have to research that. I did not research that.
I would be curious to see if it's equal or if it's higher or lower.
Yeah.
You know?
Was that a New Hampshire question?
Yes.
Yeah.
I'm going to guess double, just because there's twice the population.
Really?
I run the probation office. I had a lot of chances to see comparisons of different pieces of the work between us and them, and in general, they do about twice what we do because they're pretty similar, but there are more people there.
Wow.
And 2 years ago, the data was that Vermont was 41st in the country for heroin use.
41st?
41st.
So actually,
Is that?
a lot lower than other places.
Our rate of dependence is, it looks like 6.4 to 9.2 per 100,000 people.
So 6.4 to 9.2 dependency for 100,000 people in Vermont.
For 1,000 people, age 12 or older, yep. So there's some states that are worse.
Sorry, Connie.
It is. We can talk about some numbers from like my next slide. State overdose for opiates, and this is statewide. In 2010 was 41. 2011 was 61. 2012 was 50. 2013, 69. 2014, 61. 2015, 75. In 2016, as of October 1st, 39. Yes.
At what point in those years did Narcan start to hopefully reduce the number?
Really good question, and I did ask that. Unfortunately, throughout the state, we don't have a mechanism in place that tracks Narcan, the use of Narcan. I know like fire and rescue and things of that nature, their Narcan gets replaced, but there's nothing in place statewide that says, you know, this, on this date, in this county, this town, Narcan was used to prevent this overdose.
I'm guessing that the numbers are lower because of Narcan than they would have been otherwise.
You would think, right, right,
We don't know how much.
right. I'm sure they're gonna work on that. Because I asked it and they were like, wow, okay. And it seems to be a pretty common question on when does Narcan come in here. So we're looking good for 16. We got 3 months left and we're at 39 and last year was 75, which is nothing to be proud of because that was a horrific year. That was the highest year in the last 6 years. So, but if you look at those numbers, 41, 61, 50, 69, 61, 75, and then 39, it's going just like this, you know, every year for the last 6 years. And we're hovering anywhere from 40 to 60 on average, which is too many.
Specifically for heroin, or is that could be
That was opioids. Yeah,
Okay.
that was just not heroin.
'Cause I was
Total
just,
opioids.
Yeah.
RX, heroin, fentanyl.
so we're just informed that pharmacies are now kind of recommending that people that are prescribed opioids get Narcan, like that they're giving them. So the pharmacies are going to start doing that. So hopefully if it's an accidental overdose from like a prescription, you know, that, you know, because those people are probably falling into that number as well. Hopefully that will also help in reducing the number. So.
Yeah. Yes, ma'am.
So what is the fentanyl? What's that? What I've read, that is causing more overdoses.
Well, it's like 100 times stronger than heroin.
So it's in the heroin or it's...
It was started as an oncology drug. It was a super strong drug that was only used for people in terminal stages for pain relief. And now it's been able to be synthesized, and so it's out on the street in a big way, and it's causing a lot.
It's getting mixed with filler, so people think they're buying heroin, but it's like cheaper to make basically like a little bit of fentanyl with our filler, and so people are using it like heroin, and they're getting more they're getting more than what they expect, and that's how they're overdosing.
Thank you.
Some people, yeah.
I'm almost done anyway, so instead of looking at a blue screen with dots going around. The only thing I wanted the only thing I have left is a summary, but I want to give some Brattleboro stats, kind of like narrow it home a little bit instead of with the state's nice big broad picture. I want to talk about Brattleboro stats. We went back 3 years. Since January 13, we've had 438 incidents involving drugs across the board, all drugs. 81 of those were heroin. So 438, 81 were heroin. So you're almost 1 out of every 20 incidents that we deal with drugs, we're dealing with heroin. In 2013, we had 30 overdoses. 2 were heroin, 19 were pharmaceuticals, and 9 were unknown. Also in 2013, we had 2 deaths, 1 from heroin and 1 from pharmaceuticals. This is Brattleboro. 2014, we had 38 overdoses, 8 from heroin with 1 death, 16 from pharmaceuticals, and 14 unknown. 2015, we had 22 overdoses, 3 from heroin with 1 death, 16 from pills or our pharmaceuticals with 1 death, and 3 unknown. 2016, we've already had 26 overdoses, 13 from heroin with 1 death, 7 from pharmaceuticals, 1 from, we're saying, crack cocaine inhalants, which resulted in a death, and 5 unknowns. So we have a serious problem in our town that we really need to stand up and address and notice. 2013, we had 2 deaths, 14, 1, 15, 2, and in 16, we've already had 2. So we have our work cut out for us. When we get all this information, when we make all these arrests and these medical calls and things of that nature, the information that we gather, we put it in collection centers. It's either through the state, task force, in-house, things of that nature, because we're all trying to paint a picture here, and any piece of the puzzle that we can put into this is going to help us in the long run. So, yes, ma'am?
Do you have male, female, age range?
No, I didn't run the demographics on that, just the numbers.
So do you have a sort of anecdotal anything about people, male, female, mostly young, some, I'm trying to get a beat a little bit of the, I'm not going to write it up. I'm just
No, and this is my opinion,
Yeah.
just what comes across my desk, I would say most of them are male and fairly young. Fairly young, 20s, mid-30s, and mostly male. If I had to take a wild guess without actually diving in the data.
Data is it's a 30 white male.
So we're right on with the national average. So we talked a lot about what we do when citizens call and what we look at, how we prioritize, what our mindset is going in, what options do we have, what levels do we have. We also realize that we're one piece of the pie on this, and we have to collaborate with a lot of people. And I'm very proud to say that we have really good relationships with a lot of people within the community to help out. So when we go to an issue and we discover that it's an issue with addiction, we no longer address it strictly from a law enforcement point of view. We're not counselors. We don't pretend to be counselors. However, we tell this individual when they're coherent and they can understand, because everybody wants to be sober and everybody wants to be, they want to quit when they're in handcuffs going downstairs. So we try to take advantage of that. Look at last night. You were saying how bad this is ruining you, and blah, 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 blah. Here's an opportunity. Why don't you go talk to these people? They will help you. You're still responsible for what you did. And let me make that perfectly clear. You're still accountable and responsible for what you did. If you broke the law, you're accountable and you're responsible for it. However, you have an addiction problem. You need to get to the root of that to fix that. That's how this is all going to go away. And if we can do that through the court systems, if we can do that through the Department of Corrections, if we can do it through diversion, that's all great. They need help. They don't need just to go to jail and then be released. They need help. And we have to get them help however we can. But they need to be held accountable for what they did. So, we work through various programs to educate that. We're now starting to be more present, if you will, down at the drop-in center, at the overflow shelter, at the recovery center, just various places where people are in need. We don't want them to look at us as the bad guys, as the enemies. If you come to the PD and you want to get help, we'll get you the help you need. I mean, that's what we're there for. That goes back to our mission statement. Know the difference. We also work with DEA. A lot of places only collect pills and pharmaceuticals twice a year. Okay, the Brattleboro Police Department has a box down there 24/7. Okay, the feds will pay twice a year to empty that box. The other 363 days, I think it's our obligation to take that. If someone wants to come into the police department and drop off a bunch of opioids because the grandmother passed and they no longer need it, yeah, why wait to June 1st and have that stuff in the cabinet? Get it out of there. I'm all for that. So we do that. And we also collaborate with a lot of agencies. And I'm gonna plug you now so you can come up and talk. Okay, we recently got with Karen Peterson down at the Vermont AIDS Project and are involved with the syringe exchange program, which is really important, and all our officers need to be aware of that. I mean, that's a health concern. It's smart, just like when they're dealing with us, when they go in there, and I'll let you talk all about it, but it's when we talked about it and I looked at the program and went, 110% in favor of it. It's really, really well set up, and I would like to, and I promised Karen I'd let her come up and talk about it a little
I
bit.
don't need to come up and talk, but I will stand up right here and say, the AIDS Project of Southern Vermont, which is over on Grove Street, now offers a syringe services program where we take in used needles, dirty needles, and we'll provide individuals with clean needles as they need to. We do this twice a month, the first and third Tuesday of the month from 9 to 12. We've actually just opened. We don't even have any members signed up yet. It's all done anonymously. There are a number of syringe exchanges in the state of Vermont, but there was none in Southern Vermont. We had one back in 2001 to 2005, which the police chief was on the foot patrol at that time, and he doesn't even remember that, which tells us there were no incidences with the police officers if we ran a legal syringe exchange for 5 years with no issues with the police. We hope to do the same thing again. One of our reasons for opening it now is some of you may remember that back at the end of 2014, there was a big issue in Scott County, Indiana, with 100, and I think it ended up being 185 new cases of HIV infection, and it was all traced back to injection drug use and sharing of syringes. The CDC did a study of 26 states and came up with 220 counties that are at high risk of having that happen in their county. Windham County made their list. And Essex County in Vermont, so 2 counties in tiny little Vermont made the list of counties that have a problem. So we said, we need to take care of that in the southern part of the state. So we've opened up, I do have some cards if people are interested, need that information handed out. We're getting the word out now to people that this is available to them. So, our role in this is prevent HIV and hepatitis C infection in the community, get the dirty syringes off the street, get people clean syringes. But the biggest part is build a relationship with them. We have all the resource information. We work with the others in the room. We can get them into treatment when people are ready. Thank you.
It's a really, really good program, and the PD's behind it, 110%. So, with that being said, we understand that, like I said earlier, we're a piece of the pie. I'm almost right on time, and I appreciate your patience. In summary. Okay. In summary, yes, ma'am.
When you go out, it's my understanding that you often have a social worker who accompanies you sometimes on some of your calls.
Yeah, we've had one on staff now probably 6 or 8 years, and has paid dividends tenfold. On certain instances when we're dealing with mental health and addiction, she's been a great resource. So in summary, I'd like to make a point that prevention is the critical component of this. If we can prevent it, we're so much further ahead, and we have to start early, and we have to be very often. When we're dealing with individuals within the environment or with the addiction, accountability, responsibility, empathy, dignity, and respect, and understanding, all words that come to mind. That's what you should expect from your law enforcement officer. That goes back to our mission statement. You better know the difference between an individual who needs help an individual who made a poor decision, or someone who's there that is victimizing others. And then you act accordingly. The greatest hurdles for any treatment and recovery, and this is my opinion, stigma that's attached to it, sparse treatment facilities, lack of funding, and public education and awareness. And I really think that to attack this, we're going to have to do it on many fronts, through federal agencies, state agencies, local agencies, law enforcement. We really have to sit down and say, okay, what can you bring to the table? And certain instances, there will be, it's kind of like when you do an incident command, depending on the incident, fire may take lead, rescue may take lead, or law enforcement may take lead. No difference in this scenario, where whatever we're faced with in the incident, sometimes the Department of Health may need to take lead, Department of Corrections may take lead, law enforcement, recovery, things of that nature. So, but the key thing is I think everyone that's working this should not have to sit down and say, who do I call over at the Department of Health? Who do I know that works in probation and parole? Who do I know at the recovery center down at Turning Point? It should be like, boom, this is who you want to talk to, this is his number. And we all have a relationship, and we all talk together, which we do. And I'm very proud of that for this town. I think we're looking at this intelligently and realistically, and it's a good job by all. So that is my spiel. Thank you. I know I'm monotone. I know it's very hot, but I appreciate your patience in sitting here, and we'll go for questions.
I'm going to pass it around one more time in case anybody else had any questions that they wanted to have me ask. But here's one. This kind of goes to what you're just saying. Are there cities or towns in Vermont or in the United States that serve as a model for the Brattleboro PD's response to the opioid epidemic? So is there anything that the Brattleboro PD is looking at right now that's a model being used somewhere else that
Yes,
be considered?
of course. You can't do this alone, and we're no different than anybody else. The models that we are looking at are more, I rely a lot like on the IACP, International Chiefs of Police. Okay, they have programs called COPS, which is Community-Oriented Policing Strategies. And basically what they do is they go across the country and get these best practices and put them together. And let's be honest, we don't have the resources, whether that be financial or staffing, to do what Boston PD could do. You know, they simply could say, you're right, it's a problem. Oh my God, let's set up a division. Here's your budget, go tackle it. We're not going to do that here. We cannot do that here. So we have to work with the resources we have. And by going to those types of agencies, like the IACP or the COPS program, they understand that there's small agencies out there that have very limited resources, very limited funding, and then they say, okay, check out some of these best practices, you know, and then we use those as references. Yes, sir.
If it's accurate, to describe Brattleboro as the most liberal, touchy-feely, to use a clinical term, town in the state, liberal and forgiving and everything. If that's accurate, is that contributory at all to or invitational to drug use in the town?
I have no professional data to say either way on that.
Personal opinion from experience?
Personal opinion from experience. Are you basically saying build it and they will come?
I'm suggesting the possibility that there's a certain degree of naivete in and I can't think of better terms other than touchy-feely and huggy, that it goes a little too far sometimes in my observations. And end up, I've been in front of what I thought were naive social workers. Not differentiating between idealism and pure idealism, not differentiating between pragmatic idealism and pure idealism. Pure idealism being a little bit too far over the line, as opposed to practical idealism.
Okay, so what would be practical in dealing with the illicit drugs or dealing with addicts?
Well, I don't have the answer to your question, otherwise I wouldn't be sitting here. That's the whole point. But I've just have always had a feeling that there's a little bit too much emotion and not enough clinical sometimes.
Well, I don't share that, to be honest with you. I think if a person is suffering from an addiction, that law enforcement does have a role to play, but it shouldn't be first and foremost. I believe they should get into the system to get the help they need to get at the root of the problem. There's many ways we can do that. I would think the most least intrusive with the most respect and dignity is the way you want to go. Same way when dealing with mental health, you know. And I think in the long run you're going to get a lot more than that. And to some that may look like touchy-feely, to use your words, or things of that nature, but no. I think you have to judge every case on its merits. You can't use a blanket in any of it. So if you have an individual that is suffering from addiction that commits a crime, is diversion appropriate in this instance? You know, I mean, look at it. How many times they've been in the system? You know, do they want help? Can they get help? Have they tried to get help? Where are we at with this? You know, and you have to be patient and understanding. There's going to be relapses. No one's going to go to a turning point for the first week and then be done. I guess my point to you would be if an individual had cancer, which is a disease, and you went to the doctors and they said, hey, we got it all, you're in remission, really great, and then the cancer came back, would you be mad at that person and call them weak?
I'm talking about community response too, but also so I'm not misunderstood. I absolutely believe in intervention as far as incarceration. I mean, I basically view the whole issue as mental health and thereby deal with it clinically.
I think what you're asking, what I hear you asking is because of the resources in this community, is it drawing in or is it increase? Do we have an increase in substance use in this community because of the resources that are provided in this community? And is that what you're saying, or am I wrong on that?
You're raising a whole other thing.
Oh, okay.
I'm not going to go there, but
Okay.
good for you.
I mean, that should be.
Did I answer your question, or did I totally miss it?
No, I mean, I'm not even sure of my own questions.
Okay.
Great, thanks.
Okay. Rick?
If I can just throw something in. I've been in Brattleboro running the probation office for most of the last 34 years. I was up in the White River and Springfield offices for a while. They were between managers, and I spent about a year up there doing that, and then I came back. The difference between Brattleboro and the far reaches of the White River office in terms of getting people any kind of help are just astonishing. This is a really healthy community in a whole lot of ways. There is treatment you can get. You can get syringes. Employers aren't just sort of automatically saying, I won't hire somebody who's got a criminal record. There's an openness to giving people a chance. I have employers call me up and say, I want somebody from you because I know he's got a probation officer on him expecting him to show up for work. Brattleboro is a different community, and you're right, touchy-feely is not unfair. But I think overall, it's a good community, and it's a good community in which to get clean and sober and stay that way.
Certainly a lot of support, a lot of help. Yes, Rob?
Well, you mentioned prevention, so I just want to speak to that as well. And so what we know is that, when we look at our data about who's using in Vermont, Windham County is not that much different than other parts of the state. So the problems do manifest in different ways, but I think it's important that we not leave here tonight thinking that, Brattleboro is way worse off than anywhere else, because it's what?
That's funny anyway.
But to get back to prevention, so anytime we deal with substances, we have to talk about how do we prevent it. So we're looking at availability, and and so we deal with that by talking to doctors about prescribing practices. We're talking to pharmacies. We now have a prescription monitoring system that's not just for Vermont, but is also interstate now. So Massachusetts, Connecticut, New York, and hopefully New Hampshire will get online in the next couple weeks. We're looking at, what are the social norms, that early onset of other substance use, alcohol, tobacco, marijuana, that we keep the focus on that with parents, that it's not just one day I wake up, I'm 25, and I'm going to start using heroin. It's just not how it's happening. So that early onset, and the social norms. I mean, look at how many beer festivals we have in this community. It's like everything's around beer now. Even fundraisers for youth activities and youth organizations it's all wine and alcohol, and it's all acceptable. And then legalizing marijuana is sending this totally different message to young people about the safety of marijuana. And so it's all connected, and we need to reach our parents. I think the only correlation we can make to what you were saying about touchy-feely is that we do find sometimes that the attitudes of parents are that it's only alcohol, it's only marijuana. At least they're not shooting at heroin, or I'm going to let them drink in my home, or it's okay if we get high together. So that liberal attitude towards parenting can sometimes show up as a correlation of young people and that early use of alcohol and other substances that may lead to other substances as well.
And we're doing a lot of education. If we're talking about specifically prescription drugs, it's about educating parents or grandparents about securing their medication, or anybody who's around young people to secure their medication. So it's not readily available for experimentation and not disposing of medication. Unfortunately, we have the Brattleboro Police Department has that box right there for people. And also when you're taking medication, not necessarily taking it in front of you not kind of set this expectation that if you don't feel well, you take a medication to deal with it. It's like those kind of things. And we talk about alcohol. It's like when somebody comes into your home, you have a youth there. Don't just offer alcohol to people that are coming in. When you have a party, offer other drinks. So it's just kind of what kind of norms are we presenting in front of our young people? Because prescription drugs is usually leads to heroin, and we might also see an uptick in heroin because our providers and pharmacists are really looking at opioids and misuse and trying to squash that. And so not only is it more cost effective to use heroin, most people who don't just go to heroin, they've usually become addicted already to prescription opioids, and now they're trying to deal with that addiction that's been set. So we might see an increase in heroin, and that is actually seems to be the result of people not being able to access prescription opioids. So just be aware of that. Hopefully what that means is we're getting less people starting to become addicted to opioids because we're cutting off their supply to the prescription opioids. And I will say that pharmacists and providers in this community are really communicating a lot to try to work together to address it. So I'm hopeful that we will see a decrease. It just might not happen right away.
Right. It's going to take, all this effort's going to take time. But I couldn't agree more. Prevention is critical.
I have one question here, this is me wrote. How often do you get a call from a front desk at a motel in the area reporting concerns, or do they just want to rent rooms?
Well, I want to comment on the last part. Unfortunately, when we go to places like that, they should have called earlier. Let me put it to you that way. By the time it gets to the front desk and gets to us, and then we get up there, they should have called hours ago before it reached that level. But no, we don't get a lot of calls from the hotels. Yes, sir.
I have a question. When you came to the turning point and talked, you mentioned that you're dealing, and correct me if I'm wrong, I don't want to say less with crime, but you're dealing with more mental health problems now. And what does your department do? Or what can your department do to help you guys police better, if that makes sense? Does it make sense with people concerned with mental health conditions?
Well, obviously, we mentioned earlier we have a mental health worker on staff that we refer to and rely on a lot in issues like that. Especially, she works like 8 to 5 down there, so during the day we realize, and she's on call, so we pick up the phone and call her and talk to her. There's also from HCRS the mental crisis team that responds when she's not available. So what we have done is there's like this thing called 2-team training throughout the state that teams officers with mental health workers, and it helps us to understand what's going on and with a person suffering from mental health crisis. So basically we have looked at it for what it is. And I've always said it in the past, we would go, and if it was a mental health crisis, we would look there and we'd say, there's no crime being committed here, and then we would leave. And that's sad, because you had a person there that absolutely needs help, and let's say you're the neighbor and the police came and said, there's no crime here, so we just turned around and left. How would you feel? You're like, well, what do I do now? Who do I turn to now at this point? So we basically have just taken a real deep look at how we handle things like that. So, we will take that person, and if it meets the criteria, we'll get them eval. We will try to find someone that can talk to them to de-escalate it. We definitely will tell our mental health worker, our social worker, if you will, on staff, saying, hey, we talked to Mr. Such and Such the other night. Here's his contact information, please reach out to him. And whatever services he may need at the time, hopefully she can make contact with him and say, look, this is what's available. What do you need? And it really has helped us a lot, simply because once that person gets the help that they need, we're not going back there. We're not going back there. We're not going back there. And the situation's not escalating to a point where the outcome is not satisfactory. So
Rutland was speaking to this police department at a thing I was going to, and they're saying it also helps with what the community feels is safety. Because if somebody's reporting somebody because of a mental health issue, as far as an observer, they're thinking, oh my God, all this crime's happening in this household, and it's really more of a safety check or some other concern for somebody. So by being able to support their needs, it also makes the rest of the community feel safer, just because they're not seeing police presence constantly in their community going to a house. So I thought that was kind of a
that is a good question, because you're right. We're dealing a lot more with mental health issues than we have in the past, a real lot more. So we have to adjust our training.
Time for one more question.
Okay.
Just a question about, now you have all this support in Brattleboro. What about the outlying smaller towns and their police departments? Do they have access to supports like you do? Say Dover, Wilmington, if they pick up somebody, are they going to know or have information for mental health? who to contact?
Probably not. I can't speak for them. I certainly can't speak for them. I know a lot of the agencies that we work in, there's a few that are local to Brattleboro. Well, I don't think any. Are you just Brattleboro, or you do outlying?
I cover Windham, like the Windham Southeast, but
Yeah.
it's pretty much everybody else that I cover is Sheriff's Department, so like
Right.
Putney, Vernon.
But there are coalitions out there.
But there are.
Right, I was going to say, I think, yeah, Cassandra does us, but a lot of the other agencies that we work with are either county or state, so they would be covered. Now, whether the law enforcement out there has that type of relationship with them, I can't answer that.
I will say that the coalitions that are covering like Bellas Falls and like Wilmington are very communicative with their law enforcement, and so we share the same funding and we also just we work a lot together, the coalitions, and they're working with their law enforcement and making sure that they know what resources are available. And I feel like there's such a curve and change as far as even within our own local law enforcement. I've been working with law enforcement for 4 years now, and I have to say that there's definitely more of a shift to providing resources to people around mental health and substance abuse from there. Yeah, so I think it's a wonderful shift that I'm seeing personally. Just I think in the system, not necessarily, I think the people for sure, but I think the systems itself are changing, even nationally, and I think that's it's exciting to see that they're seeing it as a disease and trying to address it in that way. I'm just going to pass these around for if you guys have suggestions for other discussions that we have, because we get together monthly, but we try to do these quarterly. So if you have like an idea for our next community discussion, that would be great. And I'll put this box at the front there on that table, and you want to drop it in there.
Does everybody have my card? Okay.
No, I'll take it.
Here.
You need them? Okay, well, if there's nothing more for me, then that's all I have for you, and I want to thank you very, very much for coming out and sitting through this. Appreciate it.